what we've learnt over the last 30, 40 years of conservation work in Africa is that now, more than ever, protected areas have to be at the heart of any conservation strategy. Basically, biodiversity is disappearing at a very rapid rate. And there are people in these areas that are using natural resources for food security. So any future strategy can't just focus on protected areas. It has to focus on the link between livelihoods and preserving ecosystems. So you have to work in landscapes, and so the whole strategy, the larger than elephant strategy, is one based on about 80 key landscapes for conservation. That's what we call them. We call them KLCs, key landscapes for conservation. And these are large landscapes which include multi-use zones where humans are living and protected areas. You have to work on the two at the same time. You can't just work on protected areas in isolation. Poor governance absolutely undermines everything we do in biodiversity conservation in Africa, but not just in Africa. Poor governance is the big issue. I mean, if we didn't have corruption, if we had good governance, governments that are prepared to put money into conservation, they make these great declarations in the public international forums about the importance of biodiversity, but they still don't fund it. They expect the Western world to do that. One of the big challenges is to ensure that there is coherence between the development plans from the different sectors. I mean, you have good examples of this in Central Africa, where there are some amazingly rich areas and still quite wild areas in northern Congo-Brazzaville. But because of poor planning or uncoordinated planning, you have major infrastructure activities being put in there. Roads which completely traverse the entire area, huge mining operations that are coming in. Ensuring this better coherence and planning is a big challenge, but once again it's much easier said than done. If you look at areas like Southern Africa or Eastern Africa, wildlife contributes to something like 8% of the gross domestic product, wildlife-based activities. So it's incredibly important for these communities. It's much less so in Central Africa because of the context in Central Africa, and in West Africa it's also less so because biodiversity loss has gone so far that, you know, habitats have been highly fragmented in West Africa. But in Southern and Eastern Africa, you know, wildlife-based activities contributes enormously to the gross national product, and local people benefit from that. And in Southern Africa, they're particularly advanced in this because they've developed this concept of wildlife conservancies, where basically management of areas is given, you know, the authority to manage areas is delegated to local communities. So local communities say, okay, you have a stake now in the management of this area because it belongs to you. You have a direct stake in it, in managing it properly, and so local people can benefit directly from managing their wildlife areas, either through tourism, what we call non-consumptive tourism, you know, safaris, or consumptive tourism, you know, safari hunting, or offtake of meat for bushmeat. These conservancies play a major role in improving security for local communities. So, yeah, Eastern and Southern Africa, wildlife contributes enormously to livelihoods. It's less the case for the moment in Central Africa and Western Africa, but it'll come.